Are you gonna use super speed or what?
I'm gonna use my car, Trevor.
Does that mean you do or do not have super speed?
Let's go!
Greetings and salutations, guys. I'm here with my review of Wonder Man. This is the newest Marvel Studios / Marvel television series, but the one that really feels like the end of an era because it feels like the last of the shows that were greenlit under the sort of old approach when they were asked to do a lot by Disney and just create content. And we were getting these shows that you just feel wouldn't get made today as far as smaller characters, brand new characters we haven't met at all, being brought into live action, and just also tonally what these shows were trying to do. It just feels like today they wouldn't greenlight them because they are trying to focus more on a less is more approach, which is a wise idea. We certainly had way too much too fast, I think. But there's also a downside to that. And especially because I really like Wonder Man, I am a little sad that we're not going to get shows like it again, I think, because this show is small scale. You know, this show is not trying to have high stakes as far as, you know, the end of the world, but even on a superhero level, it's particularly small, which again is going to be off-putting to some, but I think that if you're open to it, this is a really well done version of this type of story. The focus here is on Simon Williams, played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, who is an actor in Los Angeles who's trying to make it. He's getting little roles here and there. He is a talented actor who's also his own worst enemy. He is self-serious. He overthinks things. We see at the beginning of the show how he torpedoes what could be a nice little role for himself by getting in his own way and trying to, maybe put more significance on a part that's meant to be just fun. But opportunity strikes when they announce that they are doing a remake of Wonder Man, which was a movie that Simon adored when he was a kid, and he thinks would be perfect for him to star in. I really enjoyed Wonder Man's marketing campaign and the fact that they did a lot of in-universe stuff as far as having behind-the-scenes footage, but it wasn't from the show. It was from the fake movie within the show, and doing a lot of in-character interviews. I think that's all been great and really clever. Intermixed with the response to that, which I think has mostly been positive, you're going to see some of the responses of people saying, oh, we don't want this. We don't care about this. Like, what's the point of this? What's the point if you're not building towards the next huge stage towards an Avengers movie? And that to me is, it's just too bad because I grew up a giant Marvel Comics fan. I've been reading them since the 1980s. And I love me a big crossover. I love the giant crossover stories. They're awesome. It's great to see these characters intermix. I'm really excited for Avengers Doomsday. At the same time, I love that there are comics that can just be having fun. There are comic books that are meant mostly just to be comedic or lighthearted and not be super important to an overall storyline. They're just important to the character whose story you're following. And I think what we've seen, unfortunately, as the MCU has grown, is that there's a real resistance to that from a larger audience, either active resistance or just not a big enough audience, because sometimes you'll have these shows that are appreciated by the people who watch them, but not enough people are watching them. So Wonder Man, which is about an aspiring actor who, I was going to say spoiler alert, but it's an important part of the show, has superpowers, but isn't a superhero. That is a show that is going to struggle, I think, to find a larger audience because people really want it to all be super important all the time. And I wish they could, be more open to something like this. And unfortunately, though, these shows are not cheap to make, even when they are something smaller scale. Maybe this one didn't cost as much as others, but still, there's definitely some big moments in this that cost a lot. So yeah, I can see resistance to the show from people who just don't like that it's small scale. And I can see resistance to the show from the a-holes who are always going to complain about race swapping. Oh my gosh, they race swapped the character. It's not important that Simon Williams is black in this show and he is white in the comics. It's, a false equivalence that people will do when they go, well, what if they made T'Challa white? Well, that would screw up the entire character. And it would be same mistake if you made Steve Rogers black, because there are certain characters that do have important significance to who they are in the world with their history. Sam Williams is one of those characters where it's not important. So it'll have resistance from those people. But then it'll also have resistance from people who might have hated Iron Man 3 and particularly hated the Mandarin twist, although those people make me sad because Iron Man 3 rules and the Mandarin twist is awesome. It's one of my favorite scenes in the MCU, I think. That reveal of Trevor Slattery and what's really going on, I think, is hysterical and awesome. And no, it didn't ruin the Mandarin for me because I didn't think the Mandarin was such a great character in the comics to begin with, but also the movie was doing its own thing. Because Trevor Slattery is not only back in this show, he is back in a big way. Ben Kingsley really is the co-lead of this series. The friendship that forms between Simon and Trevor is a crucial part of the show. It really is a two-hander between the two of them. And you've got this young, self-serious guy just sort of starting out trying to make it. And you've got this older guy who's been through a lot, to say the least. Big addictions, big ups and downs in his career, and the fact that he pretended to be a terrorist to the world. And that is never forgotten. And in fact, the events of Iron Man 3 continually come up in this show. And as a big fan of Iron Man 3, I love that. By the way, I should say there are some people who don't like the twist in Iron Man 3, but also think Trevor is a fun character. I want to acknowledge that while also mentioning that I think people overhate on the twist. Ben Kingsley is obviously a fantastic actor, and I think he's been hysterical as Trevor in his other appearances, not just Iron Man 3, but the couple times we've seen him since, including in Shang-Chi. He's he's so great here. Again, he gets to really star in this show, and proves that he is. I mean, he doesn't have to prove anything. Dude has an Oscar, but he again proves that he is more than up for that challenge. And I really think that he has a wonderful dynamic with Simon. The performances here by Kingsley and by Abdul Mateen II, they really work well off each other. These guys bring very different energy, as you kind of want in your buddy dynamics. The wild, wacky one, and then the guy who's, keeping it much more quiet and close to the vest. But it really works well, and you really do believe in their friendship. And Trevor is hiding a secret. Some of the recent promos actually started to reveal this, and I wish they hadn't, but he is hiding a secret, and that, of course, will create some curveballs for their relationship. But I think it's a really interesting through line. It's easy to hone in on Kingsley because he has such a flashy role and does so much with it, but I also want to praise the performance by Abdul Mateen II here, who is, a great actor in everything he's been in. This is what his third comic book role now, because he played Black Manta and he played Dr. Manhattan. Man, if you haven't watched the Watchmen series, please do so. But he's excellent here as well. It's an interesting role because Simon is so interior. And, I think he is a great actor in that regard as far as being able to play that quietness and that, a person who is so reserved. And look, this is a guy who's, a big, handsome guy, but he can tone down that charisma. Play a guy who you can see the charisma when he is performing as an actor. But the whole idea is that he is, really kind of put a bubble around him in his everyday life. And we get to know him more over the series and why that is and what it is about him that has caused all that. But I think it's a great performance as far as showing that and showing that this is a very flawed guy. He is a flawed protagonist. He has a lot to learn. There is a reason that he has, kind of created obstacles for himself, maybe more than there needs to be. He is his own worst enemy at times. And so I really enjoy that about his performance. And yeah, I think there are some times where some things come in from the comic books, especially pertaining to his family, where people might want more. Even I, at one point, was like, "Are they going to do anything like the comics with this one element?" And they don't. And ultimately, I think that does make sense for the show and the story they're telling here. And yes, there are other aspects of the MCU at play here, and the Department of Damage Control is a part of this show. And Agent Cleary, who we saw in Spider-Man No Way Home and in Miss Marvel, he returns here. But the stakes remain very small and personal. The stakes of this show ultimately are, will Simon become a star? Will Simon's acting career take off? And the friendship between Simon and Trevor, and how will that develop? And, how much will these two guys be able to bond and deal with the upheaval in their relationship that goes along the way? If you can just be okay with that, I think this is a really well done show. It's co-created by Destin Daniel Cretton and Andrew Guest. And of course, Cretton is the director of Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings, which was a really cool movie that had awesome action scenes. This show doesn't do that. There are a couple of tiny action scenes. They are not the spotlight. No character in the show is a trained fighter. Look, again, this comes down to the whole dynamic with, even going into She-Hulk. which I think is a much messier show than Wonder Man. I liked She-Hulk, but I also had some issues with it. Ultimately, I think Wonder Man is the far more successful show in totality. But there were people that were just kind of angry that She-Hulk was doing what it was doing, which was being a comedic legal show where, yeah, she encountered some supervillains, but they were mostly pretty goofy because it wasn't serious enough for them. It wasn't dealing with big enough stakes. And this is going to be more of that. Again, I think very well done. I think very engaging, very clever, and I really was into the story and the characters. There's one episode that is almost entirely a flashback that explains the backstory about why they don't hire people with superpowers onto Hollywood projects. And that's a really fun, clever episode. Yeah, you could think about how does that have more ramifications for the MCU in the long term? Maybe in sort of a ethereal way, not a specific plot way, but yeah, there's some interesting things to dive into there. But really, it's telling this focus story, and I really like that flashback episode, which is in black and white. There's a lot of people playing themselves in this show, but that one has a pretty notable guest appearance by someone with a big Disney history, and I think that they do some very fun things with that actor. Uh, yeah, I really like this show start to finish. There's one episode I wasn't as in love with. It's an episode involving the finalists for the roles of Wonder Man and his best friend, because you see, there's also a role for Trevor in this movie, possibly. And there's an episode focusing on those people who are the finalists going to the director's house to have their final callbacks. And I don't know, it meandered a little bit for me. And so when there's only 8 episodes, you kind of think about that a little more when you're watching them. I watched the show basically in the binge model that you will be watching it if you watch it when it goes up on Disney Plus, and I thought that one was kind of maybe the weaker of the 8. But overall, yeah, really enjoyed the show. I admired that it sort of stuck to its guns about what it was about. There is, I think a very, wonderful, no pun intended, but I kind of maybe intended, there is a nice emotional payoff, I think, at the end of the show about the story we've been watching and what it's really been all about, and Simon's journey along the way, and what it is he wants from life, and what is significant in life. Uh, and I guess it gets a little tiny bit bigger, but not really. Never in the way I think people might be asking for or wondering about or speculating about. Maybe that's one reason they didn't release this weekly. I don't think it's because they didn't think the show was good. I mean, a little behind the scenes here, they're letting us review this show a week earlier than they originally said. Not a week, but several days earlier. So I'm rushing this recording because of that. So I think they think it's good. But I also think that if they'd released it weekly, it would have driven that speculation of like, oh, what's around the corner? What giant MCU thing is coming in this series? And that's not what this show is about. And I would love to see more of Simon Williams in the MCU. I would love to see Simon Williams and Beast interact, which is a crucial part of the comic books of his, relationships in the comics. I also am ready for that to never happen because, again, I don't know if a lot of people are going to watch his show. And this, does feel like it's part of a bygone era. Like they finished this series, which began production before the strike a couple years ago, ended after, unlike Daredevil Born Again, which had the same situation, but I think everyone kind of knew that that was a bigger deal. But this again felt like this not throwback, I guess throwback to 2021, as far as what they were doing at the time with these MCU shows. But I think it, ends this sort of experiment on a high note, if that's what it is. And it almost feels like it's destined to be a cult favorite by its very nature. But yeah, I think it's really cool to have this show, and I would love if we got more stuff like it. Maybe this is the domain if they do more specials, and I really hope they do. I know we're getting the Punisher special. I look forward to the Punisher special, but the Punisher special is giving us more of something we already know and love, which is John Bernthal as the Punisher. I hope they do more weird stuff like Werewolf by Night, where they can be like, hey, here's another corner of the MCU, and maybe we can do more with it later, but here's a little sampling of it. And I think if we're ever going to get stuff like Wonder Man again, that's probably our best bet, is not a full series, but a one-off special. So fingers crossed for stuff like that. Fingers crossed to see more of Simon and Trevor, two characters that I really dig. I love that Trevor has gotten to have an ongoing role in the MCU despite all that blowback that happened after Iron Man 3, which it's the internet, things get overblown. Iron Man 3 was a giant, massive hit, and most people watching Iron Man 3 had never read a comic book in their life, and they didn't know to be mad about the Mandarin. They shouldn't have been anyway. And they weren't mad about the Mandarin, but man, those people online sure were were angry about it. But now it's been a few years. We've seen him several times. He's been a really funny, great presence, and what a different, fun role for Ben Kingsley, who's in his 80s now and still absolutely killing it as this character. So, yeah, quite enjoyed Wonder Man. No, it won't be for everybody as far as what they seek with something with Marvel. At the start of it, but I think for those of you who are open to it, there's a lot to enjoy here. All right, guys, if you can like and subscribe, that would be great. Thanks a lot. Take care.